So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner, from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
I wish they made fajita cologne, because that stuff smells good.
Good morning. It's Monday, One Big Beautiful Bill Monday, June the 30th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the One Big Beautiful Bill. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, the one big beautiful bill.
As of right now, the big, beautiful bill is up for debate on the Senate floor. Peter Ducey joining us from the White House. All right, Peter, what's Mr. Trump doing to make sure the bill gets done?
Right now, Stu, he's still got his legislative team whipping Republican votes, whipping all votes, but they are just exclusively focusing right now on Republicans because the Democrats have all fallen in line behind Chuck Schumer saying the one big, beautiful bill is a bailout for billionaires.
This isn't about billionaires. This is about factory workers and beauticians and waitresses and teachers and police officers, firefighters. I mean, this says more about Democrats that they want to screw those people and they want your taxes to go up than it does about billionaires. So that at the end of the day, that's what this is all about.
Okay, there you go. Little Stuart Varney action with the one big beautiful bill and where it stands at this particular point. Back in a minute. Thank you. More on the one big beautiful bill.
President Trump has been able to hold his party in line in an unprecedented manner. At the other end, this bill will come back and bite them.
President Trump is all...
And that was from CBS News Face the Nation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from an opinion piece from MSNBC, and it's called "The Real Reason Republicans Are Rushing to Pass the Trump Mega Bill. Much of what this bill does is ultimately immaterial to the president." And it's by James Dowry. It was a rough Friday for President Donald Trump's sense of chronology. At a midday news conference, the president was uncertain as to when the Civil War ended. He was similarly unsure as to the timeline for his big, beautiful bill. At the same news conference, Trump admitted that July 4, the date he has consistently set as his deadline for signing the legislation, is not the end-all. It can go longer. Just a few hours later, though, he changed his tune. The House of Representatives must be ready to send it to my desk before July 4th. Senate Republicans did their best over the weekend to comply with Trump's demand. They succeeded in moving the bill closer to a final vote, but as of Sunday evening, we're still settling on the bill's actual text. And in the process, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Republicans' best chance of holding one of their most vulnerable Senate seats, announced he will not seek re-election. The president's on-again, off-again deadline epitomizes the GOP's slipshod rush to pass the mega bill, which would cut taxes mostly for the wealthy, while nearly 12 million people would lose their health insurance. This Republican recklessness reflects both the president's grip on the party and his utter lack of interest in the bill's details. The July 4 deadline is is entirely self-imposed. There's no statutory reason the bill must become law this coming weekend. The next major legislative deadline is not until August, when the U.S. government risks breaching the debt ceiling. On that timeline, House Speaker Mike Johnson of Louisiana, Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota, and other Republican leaders in Congress would have additional weeks to negotiate with holdouts and tweak the bill's language to qualify for the Senate's budget reconciliation process. Instead, even before the weekend began, Senate Republicans had to push back the vote after Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough said dozens of provisions did not meet the chamber's rules to bypass the filibuster. The GOP will be able to save some of those provisions, says federal budget expert Bobby Kogan of the Center for American Progress, but Republicans still lost hundreds of billions of dollars in cuts they were counting on to offset the bill's tax cuts that are heavily tilted toward the wealthy. McDonough's rulings came after considering arguments from staffers of both parties. If Republicans were not rushing, noted Kogan, they would have more time to make sure the text complied with Senate rules. Instead, in their hurry, Republican leaders entered the weekend without even knowing what parts of the bill will survive the Senate vote. At one ideological end of the caucus, senators like Tillis and Susan Collins of Maine balked at steeper cuts to Medicaid. At the other end, Rand Paul of Kentucky and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin pushed for more spending cuts. And there was no final agreement on a major increase in the cap on deducting state and local taxes, which blue state Republican representatives have insisted on. Republican leaders are still negotiating deals to pass the legislation, but already we have seen House Republicans admit they did not read their chamber's version of the bill before voting for it. Now their Senate colleagues will most likely have to do the same and hope they do not get any nasty surprises. And remember, the bill is massively unpopular, and it becomes even less popular the more voters learn about its provisions. 8 years ago, Republicans thought a tax cut bill would save them in the midterms. Instead, that bill was so unpopular that they largely stopped talking about it before the campaign was even finished. Surely Republicans want to avoid reprising that disaster, so why not take a beat over the holiday, reassess, and see whether there are other bills to give the president a legislative victory? The answer is there's no plan B. The mega bill is not just the most important legislation of Trump's first year. At this point, it is the only major legislation of Trump's first year. If the bill is big and beautiful, that is by default. Republicans have to pass it because Trump wants them to pass something. What that something looks like does not matter to the president, who's been consistently incurious as to the bill's contents. But whether this bill would cut taxes on Social Security or throw millions off their health care, batter rural hospitals is ultimately immaterial to the president. All that matters is that he has a piece of paper to sign that cuts taxes for him and his wealthy friends and donors. Trump has his wish, and in today's Republican Party, everything else comes second to making his wish come true. And that was an article from MSNBC, Senate Republicans' Big Beautiful Bill Vote. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, from the other side of the spectrum, Kelly Loeffler, Trump's one big beautiful bill could cement economic legacy for decades. Legislation, just a second here, there we go, would prevent largest tax hike in history while creating projected 1 million new jobs in the nation. And this is from Fox opinion piece. After 4 years of record prices, regulation, and low growth, inflation is at a 4-year low. Wage growth is strong, and more than 620,000 new jobs added since January. Business investment is accelerating, and optimism is returning. Underpinning that momentum is President Donald Trump's pro-growth policies and the small businesses his agenda is built to strengthen. With the One Big Beautiful Bill Act of 2025, Republicans are working to solidify Trump's agenda with the most sweeping tax and entitlement overhaul ever to ensure the Main Street comeback isn't temporary but lasting. Since February, I've traveled across the country meeting with small business owners in nearly every sector, from family farms and factory floors to the Main Street cornerstones of restaurants and retailers. Their message is clear. They don't want bailouts, bigger tax bills, or bureaucracy. They want a tax code that enables them to plan for the long term, puts more money in their pockets, and rewards, not punishes, work, entrepreneurship, and growth. This bill delivers on all of these. The One Big Beautiful Bill urgently needs a makeover to usher in Trump's golden age. Thanks to Trump's commitment to ending wasteful spending, data shows that inflation is no longer the top concern for small businesses. Today, the threat of rising taxes has taken the top spot. Unless Congress acts soon, the 2017 Trump tax cuts will expire, raising the top tax rate on small businesses to 43.4%. That would hit more than 2/3 of small business owners, most of whom it taxes as individuals. The One Big Beautiful Bill prevents the largest tax hike in history. It makes the 2017 tax cuts permanent, including the Section 199A deduction, leaving more capital in the hands of America's 34 million small business owners to hire, expand, and reinvest in their operations. This provision alone is projected to create 1 million new jobs on Main Street and generate $750 billion in economic activity over the next decade. The bill also keeps cash in the wallets of blue-collar Americans, with no taxes on tips or overtime. It raises take-home pay for our workers without increasing costs for their employers. It repeals the IRS's $600 reporting rule, which created compliance headaches for millions of gig economy workers and small sellers. It increases the child tax credit and standard deduction for working families, and it protects family farms from the death tax, preserving generational assets rather than taxing them twice. Trump pushes Big Beautiful Bill as solution to 4 years of Biden failures, largest tax cut ever. To address the post-pandemic labor shortage, the bill incentivizes work with work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents receiving Medicaid benefits, bringing nearly 4.8 million Americans back into the workforce and removing 1.4 million illegal aliens who do not qualify for Medicaid. At a time when small businesses are still struggling to hire, this is a necessary step to align government incentives with opportunity to pursue the American dream. The legislation also reinforces a key goal of Trump's economic vision, Made in America. Companies that manufacture here will benefit from targeted tax incentives, including interest deduction for American-made vehicles. They can take advantage of full expensing for investments in capital and equipment, R&D, and factory construction. These provisions don't just encourage domestic production, they renew our industrial base and create good-paying jobs for American workers. Finally, the bill tackles one of the most overlooked obstacles to small business success: regulatory overreach and costs. Under the Biden administration, Washington added an estimated $5.8 trillion in new regulations. The One Big Beautiful Bill reins in those costs, clears out bureaucratic red tape, and restores a business climate where job creators can focus on growing, not just staying afloat. It's time for Congress to deliver President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill to his desk. Support for the bill spans party lines, just not in Washington. A majority of small business owners, including many left-leaning entrepreneurs, back the legislation's core provisions. That's because these ideas aren't ideological, they're practical. They reflect the real-world perspectives of the people who show up every day to keep our communities running. Unlike his predecessor, Trump has never lost sight of those who drive the American economy. The One Big Beautiful Bill is a reflection of his commitment to working families and small businesses. It delivers real tax relief, trims Washington overreach, rewards work, and puts small businesses back where they belong, at the center of America's success story. Congress should act without delay. Small businesses are ready to keep building, hiring, and innovating, this time with most in Washington finally behind them. And again, that was Kelly Loeffler from Fox News with the Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill could cement his economic legacy for decades. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, breaking news. At least 2 firefighters have been killed by the gunman close to Canfield Mountain in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. A suspect started a wildfire to lure law enforcement to the area. Evil. And I suspect, because all of the shootings that we've having in this country was mass shootings or assassinations of presidents and other people have been at the hands of Democrats. And so I strongly suspect that that's the case here. I think it's interesting that it's in Idaho. Idaho is known in the LA area as Blue Heaven because all LAPD police officers, when they retire, they move to Idaho for whatever reason. I guess that's... I don't know. I mean, anyhow, I suspect again that, and I've heard also, or read somewhere, that a suspect has been found, found dead. So, but I don't have any other information. But I strongly suspect that the suspect is a Democrat. And tongue-in-cheek, if you want gun control, the best way to do it, take guns away from every registered Democrat in this country. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little meditation. And that's a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, motivation. And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is the end of Marie and the beginning of Stu.
Much higher. The wind is at our sails. Earnings estimates are very, very low. Interest rates look like they're coming down all across the curve. Okay, and then the best names, as far as I'm concerned, are breaking out. Your Nvidias are making all-time new highs. Okay, and then if you look underneath the surface, their competitors, AMD breaking out, Marvel breaking out, and so Oracle, like an absolute rocket ship before the market opens this morning. So look, for investors that were able to weather this storm, the rest of this year looks like it's going to be spectacular.
Well, certainly it is going to be a market-moving day again. These numbers are incredible with the S&P and the NASDAQ ending near all-time highs on Friday, and now seeing what we're seeing with the markets today. Dow up 218, S&P, NASDAQ up as well. Then, of course, as we move into the 9 a.m. hour, you've got this voter-rama that's about to kick off, and the big, beautiful bill on the table. Caroline Downey, Michael Lee, great to see you both a lot. I will be back with you all tomorrow. And for Maria, right now it's up to Stuart Varney to take us through the next 3 hours.
All right, good morning, Cheryl. Good morning, everyone. The president's on a roll. He has notched up wins in the Supreme Court, trade with Canada, ceasefire in the Mideast, wrapped up a very successful NATO meeting. Now he's on the verge of a win for his big, beautiful bill. There'll be a series of votes in the Senate. It's called a vote-a-rama. It's going to go on for hours. Looks like the Senate version will pass. We'll see. The markets love it. A budget deal, trade deal, strong profits, and maybe a rate cut soon, all good for stocks. Look at this. It's a Monday morning, and the Dow's up about 200 points. That's pre-market. And look at the NASDAQ go again, up about a half percentage point. The S&P closed at a new high Friday, going higher this morning. Interest rates a little lower. More good news for stocks. The 10-year Treasury yields 4.27%. As for the 2-year, you're back to 3.74% there. Oil in the low $60 barrel range. Actually, you're at 65 at the moment. Gas keeps coming down ever so slowly. You're down to an average of 3.18 right now. And by the way, 21 states average below $3 on regular. Bitcoin holding firm, about 107,107.6 right now. Politics. Canada will scrap attacks on American technology companies. It was supposed to go into effect today, with our big tech paying Canada $2.7 billion. Trump threatened big tariffs if this digital services tax went through. It's gone. That is a win for Trump. In his interview with Maria, the president says he's found buyers for TikTok. Wouldn't name them, but he says it's a group of very wealthy people. The Chinese government must still approve any sale. On the show today, the Israelis shut down Iran's state bank and also a leading crypto exchange. Cash machines not working. Communications throughout the country intermittent. The internet disrupted. The Israelis have put cyber attacks front and center in modern warfare. New revelations from socialist Zohran Mamdani. He wants a higher level of taxation for white neighborhoods. He says race has nothing to do with it. It's just about affordability. Separately, he was asked 3 times to repudiate the expression, globalize the intifada. He wouldn't do it. If this is the voice of the Democrats' future, my suggestion is the party has a problem. It is Monday, June 30th, 2025. Varney and Company is about to begin.
And that was Stuart Varney and Company. And Stuart again gets it wrong when he says the market's like that. The markets are not a sentient life form. Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining you're losing, mean in debates? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, when you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Candace.
Avec Carrington, comme ça. Bon, avec lui, il avait les anciens, il n'y a plus. En tout cas, voilà, on en est. Donc, moi, je trouve ça très agité. Ils sont très lourds. Je vais déjà dire, si vous les perdez, bah, c'est que vous perdez vos clés en même temps. Tant qu'à faire. Donc ça, c'est les porte-clés. Vous avez en rouge et en noir de la connaissance suprême et absolue. Avec les yeux, en espérant que ça vous protège. Donc voilà, si Blake le porte, c'est qu'il se protège contre la connaissance, n'est-ce pas? Blake, il est scanté au sol. Il n'en peut plus. Il m'a aidé à faire les colis un par un parce que la team faisait que des bêtises. Donc il m'a dit, il faut que tu reviennes pour voir ce qui se passe. Donc là, tous les colis partent, Blake, ça y est. Il reste quoi maintenant? Les crops qui vont partir. Donc là, on est à jour sur les commandes. Voilà. Comme ça, vous pouvez nous foutre la paix. Tout est OK. Et portez-les en bonne santé, surtout. C'est sur le site ou pas encore, designer?
Je sais pas comment je suis fait pour être en forme.
En forme? Mais est-ce que c'est sur le site? Oui.
And that's Candace. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from a book that's called Good Inside. What's the opposite of understanding? For this argument's sake, it's convincing. Convincing is the attempt to prove a singular reality, to prove that only one thing is true. Convincing is an attempt to be right, and as a result make the other person wrong. It rests on the assumption that there's only one correct viewpoint. And then my question is this supposed to be convincing? Further, convincing has one goal in mind, being right. And here's the unfortunate consequence of being right. The other person feels unseen and unheard, at which point most people become infuriated and combative, because it feels as if the other person does not accept your realness or worth. Feeling unseen and unheard makes connection impossible. Understanding two things are true and convincing one thing is true are diametrically opposed ways of approaching other people, so a powerful first step in any interaction is to notice which mode you're in. When you're in one thing is true mode, you're judgmental of and reactive to someone else's experience because it feels like an assault on your own truth. As a result, you will seek to prove your own point of view, which in turn makes the other person defensive because they need to uphold the realness of their experience. In one thing is true mode, exchanges escalate quickly. Each person thinks they're arguing about the content of the conversation when in fact they're trying to defend that they are a real, worthy person with a real, truthful experience. And again, is this convincing? Back in a minute. Thank you. And so now here's His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron making I don't know if I want to say argumentative or debate or mistake, but let's say a conversational error.
Statement to the Catholic Church, the one true church. I have a problem with that.
Yeah, a lot of people do it. It annoys people who think that it means, we're right, everybody else is wrong. But that really isn't the Catholic view. We would say that the Catholic Church has the fullness of truth. We have all the gifts that Christ wanted to give his people. Doesn't mean for a second there aren't many other gifts that are distributed all over the place. In other Christian religions, in the Jewish religion, in the Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist religions. So Vatican II, for example, said that non-Christians can be saved. Even atheists of goodwill can be saved. Someone who's following his or her conscience sincerely and honestly can be saved. Now, it doesn't mean, well, aren't we all the same now? It means the Catholic Church has the fullness of what God wanted to reveal to his people. But there are...
Anyway, so... the mistake he's making here is he's explaining. And remember what I put on every day, explaining. You're explaining, you're losing. And this is, the Catholic Church thinks that by going ahead and explaining, it's doing itself some good. It isn't. It's doing no good. It sounds desperate. He sounds, on this particular thing, like he is trying to mold and shape Catholic doctrine and dogma in order to make the Catholic Church more popular. And people that are trying to be popular usually end up achieving the opposite result. People see through it. They see that this is phony. and they don't want anything to do with it. The way he should have handled this is very simple. When the guy says, well, I have a problem with whatever, right? First question you ask him, are you a Christian? Okay. And the matter of fact, first and only question you ask him, are you a Christian? If he says that he is a Christian, you could do a follow-up question asking him if he's Catholic. But if he says he's a Christian, you tell him to keep going to Mass, keep praying, keep reading the Bible, and your bad attitude will fade away. Now, if he says he's not a Christian, you tell him, well, that's your problem. That's what you need to do. You need to go to faith formation classes, get confirmed, and then you'll be on your way to truly understanding what the Catholic Church is all about. And again, your bad attitude will fall away. That's what he should have said. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Jordan Peterson with 5 ways to torture a narcissist.
Let me tell you something about narcissists. They're not just difficult people. They're dangerous. They erode relationships, distort reality, and feed on the admiration of others like parasites feeding on the host. And if you've ever dealt with one closely, perhaps in your family, your workplace, or even in an intimate relationship, you'll know exactly what I mean. Narcissists feed off validation the way a predator feeds off its prey, not with gratitude, but with entitlement. They require attention, admiration, and emotional energy in a way that is nearly parasitic. When you praise them, agree with them, or even react to them positively or negatively, you are giving them something they crave, evidence that they matter more than you, that you are in some way orbiting their self-centered universe. To starve them of validation then is to strike at the very heart of their psychological machinery. It's a slow form of psychological torture, not because you're being cruel, but because you're denying them their drug. Now, this isn't just about withholding compliments or pretending they don't exist. It's deeper than that. It's about reclaiming your internal world. The narcissist thrives on your emotional responsiveness. If they say something grandiose and you nod in approval, you've fed them. If they say something cruel and you get angry, you've also fed them. It's not just praise they want, it's reaction, attention. Being the center of your focus, you validate their identity, even the negative aspects of it, by giving your emotional energy to them. And you need to understand this dynamic if you're ever going to break free from it. You see, when you remove validation, you're not simply ignoring the narcissist, you're removing the mirror they use to see themselves. They don't have a stable sense of identity, not in the way psychologically integrated people do. Their self-worth is constantly in flux, and so they rely on others to reflect back to them an inflated, idealized image of who they are. That reflection doesn't need to be accurate. In fact, it rarely is, but it needs to be admiring. And the second you stop providing that, the moment your gaze turns inward instead of outward, you become less useful to them. You become threatening. Think about how much effort narcissists put into managing impressions. They curate themselves in social situations. They exaggerate their accomplishments. They interrupt conversations to bring attention back to themselves. This isn't accidental. It's strategic. They're constantly seeking cues from others that affirm their superiority or specialness. And when they don't get it, their mood collapses. They become petulant, passive-aggressive, sometimes even hostile. Why? Because they are emotionally dysregulated. And without your validation, they're thrown into a psychological spiral they can't easily recover from. What does starving a narcissist of validation look like in practice? It means no longer playing into their emotional traps. When they fish for compliments, you don't bite. When they make an outrageous claim, you don't challenge it, but you also don't affirm it. You remain neutral, composed, even bored. This neutrality is deeply unsettling to them because it suggests you're not under their spell. And that forces them to confront the terrifying reality that they may not be as important as they think they are. It's important to remember that narcissists are often highly perceptive, not emotionally empathetic, but skilled in detecting weakness, social cues, and emotional openings. They'll test your boundaries. They'll provoke you. They'll try to guilt trip you or flatter you or manipulate you into re-engaging with their narrative. And you must remain vigilant. The more indifferent you appear to their highs and lows, the more destabilized they become. You're not responding to their emotional bait, and in doing so, you're dismantling the control they once had. This is especially difficult if you've been in a long-term relationship with a narcissist. You may have been conditioned to provide them with constant reassurance, to buffer their insecurities, to validate their every move just to keep the peace. It can feel unnatural, even cruel, to withdraw that validation, but that discomfort is the residue of the power they held over you. You are not being cruel, you are being free. And that freedom is a direct threat to their dominance over your mind. Now, some narcissists will escalate when deprived of validation. They may lash out, gaslight, or play the victim. They may accuse you of being cold, distant, or selfish. That's part of their playbook. They're not truly interested in your emotional needs. They're only interested in reestablishing control. Your job isn't to fix them, soothe them, or argue with them. Your job is to stay grounded, to resist the pull back into the chaos. The less you react, the more the narcissist is forced to sit with themselves. And for them, that is a deeply uncomfortable place. Without your validation, they are left with the reality of their own emptiness. And they will either escalate or retreat. But what they will no longer do, what they cannot do, is feed. Setting immovable boundaries with a narcissist is not merely a suggestion, it is an act of psychological self-defense. Narcissists are boundary violators by nature. They believe that your time, energy, emotions, and even your identity are extensions of their own will. They will push, prod, manipulate, and guilt you into surrendering parts of yourself, often in subtle increments, until you no longer recognize the line between your needs and theirs. That's why boundaries, clear and inflexible ones, are essential, not to punish them, but to protect you. A narcissist will rarely respect a soft boundary. If you say no with hesitation in your voice, they will hear it as an invitation to negotiate. If you express discomfort without certainty, they will exploit the ambiguity. This is not about misunderstanding, it's about control. They don't just test boundaries for the sake of closeness, they test them to see how much authority they can assert over you. Every time you compromise to keep the peace, you teach them that your lines can be redrawn. And once you've taught them that, they'll never stop pushing. An immovable boundary is not just a spoken rule. It is a standard you enforce without apology. You say, I will not tolerate being yelled at. And when they raise their voice, you leave the room. You declare, I need space when I'm overwhelmed. And when they chase you with demands, you turn off your phone. These are not negotiations. They are declarations of sovereignty. And narcissists find this intolerable. They are accustomed to bending others to their will, to making people doubt themselves through charm or intimidation. When you set a boundary and enforce it with consistent action, you introduce them to a world where their tactics no longer work. They will, of course, test you. That's inevitable. They may mock your boundary, accuse you of being too sensitive, or twist your needs into selfishness. They'll try to make you feel guilty, as though you're the one breaking some invisible rule of loyalty or love. This is classic narcissistic projection. They are not upset that you've set a boundary, they're upset that they're no longer in control of you. And their reaction is not proof that you're being unreasonable, it's proof that the boundary is working. It's important to note that narcissists often rely on emotional enmeshment. They blur the lines between themselves and others so thoroughly that your independence becomes a threat. They want to be the center of your psychological universe. So when you begin to set boundaries, especially firm, consistent ones, it sends a clear message. You exist outside of them. That is a destabilizing realization for the narcissist. It reminds them that they do not possess you, that you are a separate, thinking, feeling individual with your own rules. And nothing infuriates a narcissist more than the loss of that illusion. Boundaries are also mirrors. When you set one, you force the narcissist to confront something about themselves, something they would rather ignore. Your boundary implies that their behavior is unacceptable, that it has consequences, and that it doesn't align with how you expect to be treated. Narcissists don't like consequences. They like compliance. But when you set a boundary and pair it with action, you introduce accountability into the dynamic, and that is a form of torture to someone who has spent their life escaping it. Now, the challenge for many people isn't setting the boundary, it's maintaining it. Narcissists can be seductive when they want to be. They'll apologize, make promises, offer affection, or temporarily improve their behavior just long enough to lull you into lowering your guard. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the most powerful psychological conditioning tools. When someone is kind only occasionally, unpredictably, the brain clings to the hope that the good version of them is the real one. That's the trap. A narcissist will give just enough to keep you hopeful, then violate your boundaries again the moment you relax. This is why your boundaries must be immovable, not based on their behavior, not dependent on your mood, and not up for debate. You hold the line every time, even when they cry, even when they rage, even when they say you're the only one who's ever truly understood them. Because the second you make a boundary conditional, you give away your power. And once they know your line can shift, they'll never stop trying to shift it. Boundaries are not acts of aggression, they are acts of clarity. They are statements that say, this is who I am. This is what I will allow. This is how I will live. And when you stand by them, you become untouchable, not because the narcissist won't try, but because they can no longer succeed. Speaking the truth precisely is one of the most powerful and disarming acts you can commit in the presence of a narcissist. They thrive in environments of vagueness, emotional manipulation, and psychological ambiguity. They use distortion, exaggeration, and selective memory to bend reality into a shape that suits their narrative. But the moment you introduce clarity, accuracy, and precision into the dialogue, you begin to dismantle the very illusions that sustain their dominance. Truth, especially when it is calmly and clearly stated, is like sunlight to a parasite. It exposes, it cleanses, and it burns. Narcissists do not operate well in a world where language is used with integrity. They rely on confusion and emotional intensity to override your rational thinking. If you confront them with general statements like you're always selfish or you never listen to me, they will twist those words into accusations against you. They'll pick apart your phrasing, question your memory, or turn your frustration into proof that you are the unstable one. But if you speak the truth with precision, if you say, for example, yesterday during our conversation at 7 p.m. when I expressed how tired I was, you laughed and told me to stop being dramatic, you removed their ability to escape. You pin them down, not with emotion, but with undeniable facts. Precision forces accountability. It draws clear lines around behavior, intent, and consequence. Narcissists hate this because it removes the gray areas in which they manipulate. It denies them the ability to rewrite the story. When you are specific, you are grounded in reality. You become difficult to gaslight. You don't leave openings for them to distort your words or play the victim. You are not lashing out, you are observing, documenting, and stating what happened as it happened. And this creates a tension they cannot easily resolve. But it's not just about confronting them. Speaking the truth precisely also protects your own mind. In a relationship with a narcissist, your perception of reality can begin to erode. You start questioning yourself, your memories, your emotions, your instincts. This is the psychological damage of chronic gaslighting. But when you train yourself to observe clearly, to label experiences accurately, and to express them without embellishment, you strengthen your sense of reality. You regain your footing. You begin to trust your own mind again. Clarity in speech begins with clarity in thought. Narcissists love to provoke reactive, emotional responses. They want you to yell, to cry, to stumble over your words. Because when you are emotional, you are easier to discredit. But when you speak with calm, firm precision, you force them into a kind of cognitive corner. They may still deny, deflect, or rage, but the power of your truth remains intact. And more importantly, you remain intact. You become the anchor in the storm. This requires practice. Precision doesn't come naturally when you've been conditioned to walk on eggshells. You may have spent months or years filtering your words to avoid setting them off. You may feel that if you speak too clearly, they will retaliate harder. And in some cases, they will. That's why this strategy must be used with discernment and strength. It's not about fighting every battle. It's about choosing the moments when truth, spoken precisely, becomes a tool of liberation rather than just resistance. Narcissists often use language as a weapon. They reframe situations, deny statements, and redefine concepts in real time. If you say they were rude, they'll say you're too sensitive. Interrupt that process. You take the abstract and make it concrete. You turn feelings into facts, confusion into clarity. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim the narrative. This also means being precise with yourself. Notice the patterns. Journal the incidents. Record the specific behaviors, the exact words, the outcomes. This is not about obsession. It's about countering distortion with reality. When you articulate what's happening with honesty and exactness, you can no longer be gaslit into believing it's all in your head. You become a witness to the truth, both for yourself and in your interactions with the narcissist. The challenge is that truth often comes with consequences. A narcissist confronted with a clear and accurate account of their behavior will feel exposed. They may retaliate, project, or double down on manipulation, but that doesn't mean the truth wasn't worth speaking. What matters is that your words were chosen carefully, delivered without malice, and grounded in reality. That is strength. That is clarity. And that is precisely what the narcissist cannot control. Refusing to engage in a narcissist drama is not an act of apathy, it's an act of supreme emotional control. Narcissists are addicted to drama, not because they enjoy chaos for its own sake, but because drama gives them relevance. When things are calm, when people are grounded, when relationships are built on mutual respect, the narcissist feels invisible. In that kind of environment, there is no spotlight, no stage, and no audience, so they stir the waters. They provoke conflict, incite arguments, create confusion, and position themselves at the center of it all. And every time you get pulled in, every time you try to explain yourself, defend yourself, or calm them down, you feed the very dynamic that gives them power. They want your emotional energy. That's the currency of their control. If they can make you angry, make you cry, make you justify yourself or question your own judgment, they win. Because in those moments, the focus is on them. They are not interested in resolution. They are interested in reaction. So the most effective counter strategy is not to match their intensity, not to play their game, but to simply opt out of the game entirely. You become the observer, not the participant. This is not easy. Narcissists know exactly which emotional buttons to push. They study your insecurities, your fears, your guilt, and your desire to be understood. They will accuse you of things that aren't true, then demand that you explain yourself. They will say something cruel, then insist you're overreacting. They will pretend to be the victim just to make you look like the aggressor. It's a pattern designed to disorient you, to make you feel like the only way to get peace is to give in, explain more, apologize again, or emotionally collapse. But the truth is, the more you engage, the more you lose. Disengagement does not mean silence out of fear or avoidance. It means staying composed and non-reactive in the face of manipulation. It means choosing not to respond to provocation with argument. It means refusing to clarify what they already know but pretend not to understand. It's a form of psychological aikido. You don't meet force with force. You let their energy fall flat against your calm. Narcissists don't know what to do with someone who refuses to dance to their emotional rhythm. It's like throwing a tantrum in an empty theater. Without an audience, the performance dies. One of the tools narcissists often use to create drama is triangulation, pulling in third parties to create confusion, jealousy, or competition. They might bring someone else into the situation, imply negative things that others supposedly said about you, or compare you unfavorably to another person. The goal is to destabilize you, to make you seek reassurance, to make you fight for your worth. When you engage, when you try to defend yourself or prove your value, you play right into it. But when you remain centered, uninterested, and detached from the bait, you become immune to their tactics. This refusal to engage isn't about pretending not to care. It's about choosing where to place your emotional investment. You don't owe your energy to every accusation, every lie, or every exaggerated crisis. You can acknowledge what's being said without stepping into the storm. You can say, I see what you're trying to do, and then walk away not to punish, but to protect your peace. And over time, that peace becomes intolerable to a narcissist, because drama is how they avoid facing themselves. The absence of your reaction creates a mirror. It forces the narcissist to sit with their own emptiness, their own emotional volatility, without a scapegoat. And in that stillness, they begin to unravel. That's the hidden power of disengagement. It's not just a defense, it's a kind of exposure. Without your participation, the narcissist is left to confront the one thing they've been running from, the void within. When you detach from the drama, you also give yourself space to think clearly. You begin to see the patterns, the manipulation, the cycles that once seemed so personal. You realize it was never about you, it was about control. You learn to distinguish between what deserves your energy and what is simply a trap. And that awareness is the beginning of true freedom. You stop reacting and you start choosing. You stop explaining and you start observing. You stop participating, and doing so you reclaim your power. Watching without reacting is a discipline, a psychological posture that strips the narcissist of one of their most effective weapons, your emotional reactivity. Narcissists are not just interested in control for its own sake. They feed off your emotional energy because it gives them a sense of power, importance, and confirmation that they matter more than anyone else in the room. If they can provoke you, make you cry, make you angry, or make you lose control, they feel like they've won. But when you observe them with detachment when you watch, take note, and remain composed, you cut off their emotional supply line. You deny them the drama they seek, and in doing so, you unmask the emptiness of their tactics. To watch without reacting is not the same as being passive. It is an active choice to respond with awareness instead of instinct. It means you see the game they are playing and refuse to move the pieces. You hear the provocation, but you don't take the bait. You see the manipulation, but you don't fight to correct the narrative. This frustrates the narcissist to no end. Their entire behavioral system depends on pulling you into a loop of reaction, conflict, apology, confusion, guilt, reassurance, a cycle that keeps you psychologically tethered to them. But once you step outside that cycle and begin observing instead of reacting, the spell starts to break. This approach takes mental discipline. You must train yourself not to answer every accusation, not to correct every falsehood, not to prove yourself right in every argument. The narcissist will say things that are outrageous, hurtful, or absurd. They will twist your words, misrepresent your intentions, and push your buttons with surgical precision. But every time you react, even if you're defending the truth, you give them control. You make the conversation about them. You return the spotlight to their performance. Instead, when you watch, you preserve your energy. You allow the narcissist to reveal themselves for who they are without your interference. You stop covering for them with emotional labor. This posture of observation also reveals patterns you may have missed before. When you're no longer caught in the emotional chaos, you start to see the predictability of their behavior. You notice how they escalate when they feel ignored, how they project their flaws onto others, how they spin victimhood to avoid accountability. You see how they manufacture crisis when peace threatens their sense of control. These patterns become visible only when you stop reacting long enough to look clearly. Watching brings clarity. Clarity brings power. Narcissists are often deeply uncomfortable when someone sees through them. Their entire persona is constructed to hide insecurity, emptiness, and a fractured sense of identity. When you react emotionally, you become part of their illusion, part of the emotional chaos they control. But when you remain calm, grounded, and observant, you send an entirely different message. I see you and I'm not afraid. That message is deeply unsettling to them because it means you are no longer susceptible to their tricks. It means you have become psychologically independent. There is also a dignity in choosing not to react. Narcissists want to drag you into the mud to reduce you to their level, to make you scream so they can call you hysterical, to make you angry so they can say you're the problem. But when you hold your ground with silence, calm, and stillness, you rise above their reach. This doesn't mean you don't feel the pain or injustice of the situation. It means you don't hand them your power just because they demand it. You feel it, but you contain it. You let the moment pass without letting it define your behavior. Watching without reacting can also protect your sanity. Narcissists create chaos so consistently that you can begin to doubt your own perception. But when you adopt the role of the observer, you stop internalizing their narratives. You stop believing that their version of reality is the truth. You become the one who sees clearly, who remembers accurately, who resists the pull of emotional distortion. This internal stability becomes a kind of armor not to shut you off from the world, but to shield you from being emotionally hijacked. In many ways, this is a form of emotional jiu-jitsu. You allow the narcissist to expend their energy, to throw their emotional weight around, while you remain steady and unmoved. Eventually, their tactics exhaust themselves. The drama loses its impact. The manipulation becomes transparent. And in the space they once occupied, you find your composure, your clarity, and your control. You've seen them clearly. You've watched without being swept away. And that vision, that unshakable stillness, is something they cannot touch. Starving a narcissist of attention is one of the most profound and effective forms of resistance. It is not loud. It is not confrontational. It does not involve argument or explanation. It is quiet, consistent, and deeply destabilizing to the narcissist's entire psychological structure. Attention is their lifeblood. Whether it comes in the form of praise, anger, fear, admiration, or even hatred, it feeds the illusion they work so hard to maintain. When you give a narcissist attention, you affirm their centrality. You reinforce the idea that they are important enough to deserve your emotional response. But when you withdraw that attention not out of spite, but from a place of clarity, you begin to dismantle the very foundation of their identity. This isn't about playing games. It's about no longer participating in a system that rewards toxic behavior. Narcissists are not necessarily seeking positive attention. In fact, they often prefer negative attention because it's easier to provoke. If they can't get admiration, they'll settle for outrage. If they can't be praised, they'll instigate conflict. Why? Because indifference is the one response they cannot tolerate. It says, you are no longer in control of how I feel. You are no longer the axis around which I revolve. That is psychological starvation to a narcissist. The reason this works is because narcissists are external creatures. Their sense of self does not come from within. It is entirely dependent on how others respond to them. They need mirrors, people who reflect back to them a distorted sense of superiority, importance, or victimhood. Without those mirrors, they begin to feel invisible, irrelevant, and vulnerable. So when you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, when you stop feeding the cycle with your attention, they are forced to face the silence. And in that silence, their carefully curated self-image starts to fracture. Withholding attention doesn't mean being cold or hostile. It means becoming emotionally neutral. It means refusing to engage in the highs and lows they try to manufacture. When they provoke you, you don't respond. When they flatter you, you don't lean in. When they create drama, you don't amplify it. This neutrality is not weakness, it's strength in its purest form. It's the strength of self-possession, of knowing that your value is not determined by their perception. It's the strength of someone who has seen the game, understood the rules, and simply decided not to play. Of course, narcissists will escalate when you begin to withdraw attention. They will accuse you of being distant, selfish, cruel, or ungrateful. They may even become temporarily more charming, as if they've suddenly seen the light and want to reconnect. But this is not transformation, it's desperation. They sense that their supply is slipping away, and they'll do whatever they can to lure you back in. If that fails, they may turn to others, triangulate, or smear your name. These are all attempts to regain control, to pull focus back to themselves. And your job is not to stop them, your job is to stay emotionally disengaged. The beauty of starving a narcissist of attention is that it reorients your focus. Instead of constantly monitoring their moods, their needs, their manipulations, you begin to pay attention to your own life. You start investing energy in your own goals, values, relationships, and healing. The space that was once occupied by managing them becomes available for your own growth. And in that shift, something profound happens. You begin to reclaim your sense of self. It also teaches you something essential, that you do not need to fix, fight, or change anyone in order to be free. Your freedom lies in detachment, in choosing where your energy goes, in deciding what and who you will no longer validate with your attention. This is not about punishing the narcissist. It's about protecting your mental and emotional sovereignty. It's about becoming a person who does not respond to chaos with chaos, while meet manipulation with justification, who does not confuse reaction with responsibility. There is an almost spiritual stillness in this kind of disengagement. It says, I see you, I understand what you're doing, and I choose not to participate. That choice made consistently, without drama, without explanation, is powerful, because it forces the narcissist to face a reality where they are not the center, where their words do not shake you, where their tactics do not control you. And in that space, stripped of the attention they crave, they begin to collapse into the very emptiness they've spent their lives trying to avoid.
And that was Jordan Peterson. Back in a minute. Thank you. And this is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that feminism is power for men.